All right, so in this video, we're going to take a look at states. In our last video, we took a look at how to do a basic flow graph, use a flow machine, and to get that up and running, just to run over the idea and how things work with units in Bolt. But this time, we're going to take a look at how states work. Okay. Also in the scene editor here up top, I made our right cube here purple just so that we can see the difference between those two. All right, so in order to make or add a state machine to an object, it's going to be very similar to how we did it with the flow machine. We're going to select the object, we're going to go over to the inspector, and you would add component, and you would actually type in state, and you would add a state machine here. Now I already have a state machine added, as you can see here. And of course, it's going to have the similar thing where you can do source. You can either do embed or macro. We're going to do macro, and then you would actually add your macro. Okay. So as you can see here, I have a test state macro already added. And in my macros folder under state macro, I have the macro created here. Now, of course, just like before, you can right click, hit create, go up to the top where it says bolt, and you can actually do state macro, and you can actually create your macro that way. And this is where you would actually create your macros here. Okay, so let's take a look at the macro that I already have, my state macro here. Now it's going to be very similar to using the flow macro, where you have your grid, and when you right click, you're going to get some options. But in this case, we're going to get some state options. Okay. But let's wrap our heads around kind of what a state is first. In its simplest form, think of a ceiling fan where you walk into a room and you have like a light switch, and the fan is off, the ceiling fan is off, and when you turn the light switch, now the ceiling fan is on. But of course, like most ceiling fans, you have like this little pull cord, and when you pull that cord, that ceiling fan goes into a slow mode, right? Your fan goes slow, it turns slow. And then you pull the same cord, it then goes faster. And if you pull that cord again, it may go back into the off state. So generally, states are just different actions at different points of time, right? So we're gonna create that type of mechanism here, and it's actually pretty simple. Now in this area, your area is gonna be blank. However, I already have everything set up. But let's take a look over the different options we have when we right click. So I'm going to right click, and you're going to get a few options here. The first option is you're going to get something like flow state, and this is going to be your main states you're going to be using to connect to other states. Another option, you're going to have a super state, and that's what we're going to use here. As you can see my green here, super state. And basically that means you can put a state within a state. You can put states within this super state. And then if you right click, you can do any state. And that's simply allowing you to transfer from or transition from any other state. Okay. So what we're going to focus on is we're going to do first a super state. And then within that super state, you want to create another state. So right click and create a super state like so. Okay, so go ahead and click that. And before we actually go into our state here, what you want to do is go ahead and right click on the spin change color or your super state here, whatever you named it, and you want to go ahead and toggle start. And the reason you do that is because we want this to start immediately. We want this event to start immediately. So when we go into it, we'll be able to then toggle start the next particular state. And what we're going to do is actually toggle start the off state. So make sure you do that as well. All right, and I'm going to go inside, double click on your super state. Now you're not going to have anything here. These are my different states. Let's go ahead and double click on our gray area so we can make our screen larger. Now the way this works is, like I said, the ceiling fan. The ceiling fan has an off state, it has a slow state, and it has a fast state. So usually when I'm thinking about working with states, I kind of create the states first. So I would right click and just go ahead and create a flow state. And then with that flow state, you want to name it what you need it to do or whatever its abilities are. So in this case, we would just name it off state. And you can write a summary for it, kind of a description of what it does, but generally off state is what that is. So we have an off state here, okay. All right, and the next thing I want to do is I can actually copy, Control C, paste, and then I can change this name to slope. And then again, copy, paste, and I can do the same thing and name this one to be fast. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is, as I said in the previous area, we want to right click and toggle the off state. And that's because when we come into this particular super state, as soon as we come into the super state, as soon as the event starts, we need to tell it, hey, this is where you start. This is where the initial this is the initial beginning. So we want to make sure that this is toggled to start, and you know that by its color of green. So you want to make sure you do that. Okay. I'm going to turn this off though in this case, just because I already have this one already toggled to green. All right, perfect. All right, so now that we have these three different states, what do we want these states to do when we're actively on a particular state? So let's take a look at the ones I already have set up. So I would go into off, double click, and within here you have on enter state, you have an update event, and you have an on exit state event. I won't be using these in this particular example, or at least not in this particular state. So on the on enter state, you have a transform rotate. So what you want to do is basically right click, add unit, transform, rotate. And you can just rotate, click, search for that, and look for rotation. And is it this one? Nope. Let's look again, rotate. All right. I think it's going to be rotate on Euler's. Yep, there we go. All right. And so you would just type in transform rotate and look for the transform rotate with Euler's. Okay. Now the idea is that because we're using this, it's a self in this particular double click. This is assigned to this object. So this self basically means this is going to rotate on 0, 0, 0 axis. So that basically means it's not going to rotate. Okay, and that's the state that we want this object to be in when this event starts. Okay, all right. And so I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and you can actually set yours up just like this. And of course, you can take this, click, and drag to that point, and we'll be pretty much done with this state. So if you want to go back in the queue, you see these options here where it says spin, change color. Right up here, it's like a cookie. So you can go ahead and click there, and you can go all the way back to the front and double click, as you can see. So the next state we're going to go into is the slow state. So I'm going to double click the slow state, and you want to go ahead and go in here. And so in this case, what we want to do is do another rotation. So what you would do is search, of course, for your rotation on Euler's, and we want to put it at -1. Okay. Now, in terms of on enter state, we want this to run it every frame. Okay. So you would take the update and also connect that as well as the on enter state. Okay. And then that's it for that one. And for fast, it's going to be identical. The only difference is we wanted to go a little faster, so we're going to put a -5 here. All right, perfect. All right. And so once you set all that up, it should look like this, but without the transitions, because we're going to now create transitions. So I usually do it this way so that I can cement in my head the different states, and then we can do the transitions, okay? And generally, the idea of states is that, you know, when you're working with states, the state is just really the thing you needed to do, and the transition is the thing you push to make it move to the next state. Okay, so if you want to transition to another state, you just right click and you say make transition, and then you pull it and you select the one you want it to go to. So we're going to go ahead and click that like so. And so I'm going to actually take a look at this one. Now let's double click on the one you have here, just like this. You want to double click on your arrow. And inside here, you're just going to have a transition trigger, right? And you have to ask yourself, what do you want to happen? So in order to go from the off state to the slow state, how are you going to make that transition happen? And in order to make that transition happen, I want an input. And so in my case, I set it up to be a horizontal event or a horizontal input event here. So an on button event. And so when you do that, you can go to add unit and just type in on button input. You can do on button click, you can do mouse, whatever you want to do. But in this example, we're just going to go ahead and do on button input. And so you would do that and you would connect your flow into that trigger transition. Now, in terms of the button, I'm using the horizontal here. And if you go to your input settings, horizontal for me is this, where horizontal, that's the name I'm using. And if I touch the right or the left, the A or the D, that's going to transition this here. Okay. All right. All right. So let's go back. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And then I'm going to go back. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this transition. So you want to transition to the next one, just like so. Okay. So you would do the same thing here. And then you would go into that arrow. I'm going to go show you this one. And you would do the same thing here. You would just simply do the on button event and the same thing. And if you really want to, you can copy, make the transition from here to here, and then you can paste. And you can actually just make that transition just like so. Okay. All right, perfect. Now I'm just going to go ahead and delete this because we don't need that. All right. And that's pretty much it for that. So let's take a look at exactly how it works. So I'm going to hit the play button. All right. And so right now we're in the off state. Now, if I hit the letter D key, just tap the D key, it's going to go into that particular, it's going to do that. Okay. And if I hit the D key again, it's going to flow to now fast. Now it's in the fast state. If I hit the D key again, it's now back in the off state. And I can keep doing that over and over, simply like a fan. Now you can see on the left side, our other cube still has the previous flow machine. And remember, that flow machine was different, right? That flow machine took in an input access, right? And it updated over time. And when you hold, basically, as long as it's checking for that input, as long as I'm holding down the button, it's going to spin. So as you can see, when I'm holding down the button, it continues spinning. This one, however, is just taking input. Perfect. And I hope that really helps with understanding states. It's very basic, but states can be expanded on. There's so many ways you can utilize states for so many different things. But I thought maybe explaining maybe a ceiling fan idea helps kind of wrap your head around the very basics of it. Of course, you can go in different directions. For instance, say you didn't want to have a ceiling fan idea and maybe you wanted to transition back into the off state from the slow state, you can absolutely right click, make transition, and go back. And so if you can see the arrows, this arrow would mean you would go back into this state, and then this arrow would mean you would come into this state. So generally what that's saying is that when you're in the off state, it's looking for the transition action, the thing that you need to do to get here. And that's what we set up in this particular area, right? This transition. So when we hit this button, it takes us here. Okay. So if we go into this area, there's nothing here to take us back to the off state. So let's see if we can do this on the fly and create a very quick button just to go back as opposed to moving to the fast state. So I'm going to copy this. Very simply, I'm going to paste it, but instead of having the horizontal, I'm going to do a different button. Let's see here. I can use the Fire 1. Maybe Fire 1 would work. So I'm going to copy the name Fire 1 and I'm just going to paste it here for our input. And then I'm going to drag this into there. Okay. So what Fire 1 is telling me is my left control button on the keyboard and the mouse 0 should take me back to that transition, back to that particular state. So now as you can see, it's taking in an input, which is great. So what I'm going to do is hit play and let's see if that works. All right, so I'm going to hit the D key to get it from the off state to the slow state. And now we want to go back. So the Fire 1, it's going to be left control. So the left control, and there you have it. We went right back into the off state. And so again, you can set this up and this can get very complex very quickly. And you can have all types of states for all types of things like UI, for character controllers, all types of things. But generally, this is just a quick example on how states work. All right, so I hope that was very useful. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. And we're going to talk a little bit about variables very quickly. All right, talk to you guys soon. Thanks. Bye.